Hi everyone, this is Lisbeth Stull, Cottage Caboodle. I'm a painter and I absolutely love painting and teaching to students of all different levels. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do a simple door hanger, and it has a very minimal amount of products that you have to use, as well as a really accessible wood surface that you can paint on, and you don't have to have any real special brushes, just in good quality, nice shape, not a lot of dried paint in them and that kind of thing, and you'll have a great result. So I hope you enjoy this, and you'll have, if you haven't seen it already, there is a link to the entire line drawing and all the directions and the supplies that I used if you haven't seen it already. So I hope you have a good time. I know I will. I always have fun painting. So let me turn my camera down so you can see what I'm painting on. Here is a 12-inch wood surface. Now, this isn't anything fancy. It's, like I said, 12 inches across. It's about 1/8 of an inch thick, so it's a real thin surface. So very, very lightweight. You can attach it in a number of different ways and not have any problem at all. You can get these on Amazon. I think that the ones I got were around $14 for 12 of them. So they're very, very affordable. Sometimes you can find them at the Dollar Tree. If you'd rather have ones with holes, they make them with holes at the top and so forth. But this is the surface I'm going to be using. And just to let you see, this is the piece that we're going to be painting, just a little welcome sign. The nice part about painting your own surface and your own your own signs is that you can make it any color that you want. If you wanted to make this a very neutral palette and you wanted the stripes to be kind of a khaki or burlap color, you could do that. You could change this completely out and make it your own. It's really got a lot of possibilities. So I'm going to go through this particular color palette with you. I tried to use some colors that are very popular right now and looked especially springy. This is called Garden Party because there's a bird, there's a few little bugs, and then of course some blossoms and things. So I will be using some acrylic paint pens. They're a little bit different than any other kind of ink pen. So we'll be using that, but that makes it real easy to embellish and make it your own as well. So the other thing is we'll be using a stencil, and that stencil is available on Amazon, or if you go to any of the big box stores, you can always find a stencil, and you may even have one already. So I'm going to get started. I use all DecoArt Americana products. This is the multi-purpose sealer, and what it does is it helps the paint to adhere to the wood. It also protects the wood and seals it, so you don't need as much paint. The good part is I can use a 50-50 mix for my initial base coat and give this a nice first coat that will take. Sometimes when we have a piece of wood that isn't very it's good enough, but it's not super high quality, if we put that sealer on it, it will help us to not use as much paint, and we can just get a nice initial base coat. Now, this isn't my best brush for sure. You can see all the kind of texture that it's leaving in there. It's just a brush that is past its prime for me to use on other things, but it works great for just giving this first base coat, especially since that sealer can also be used as a decoupage medium. I have adhered paper, fabric, all kinds of things to wood using that multi-purpose sealer. But you can see that I'm kind of giving it a chance to get real worked in and going every which direction. I want it to go almost like rubbing in sunscreen or something. I want it to go into all those little grooves in the wood, especially because this is a very it's kind of a low quality wood. It's not something that you would be making furniture out of or something. So we want to make sure that we can get this paint to stick to it. I won't be doing it today, But when you're doing something like this, a sign, especially if it's going to be outside, you want to make sure that you've got both sides sealed like this with the white, which is what I'm using for a base coat, but you want that sealer on both sides. That's going to protect your wood so that it doesn't draw up any moisture, and it will last for as long as possible outside. You'll still have to put a sealing top coat on it. I'm just drying it with my heat gun, and you know, that sealant when we're done painting is going to keep the wood protected so that you don't get moisture inside of it. This is a plywood, so it's got a lot of levels of wood all glued together to make the wood. And if it gets a lot of if it gets a lot of moisture in between there, then you're going to end up with some of those layers peeling up, and you don't want that, of course. So we're going to try and protect it as much as we can. I'm just trying to get this a little dry, accelerating, you know, accelerate the drying time. And so I'm just giving it a little bit of this. It's a little bit different than a hairdryer. It's not got a lot of wind to it, so it doesn't kick up lint and that kind of thing, but it does have some heat, which is why I'm keeping it moving, because I don't want that heat to bubble up that paint that I just laid down. I'm going to even give it a little bit of warmth to the back side here. And I see that it's putting a little bit of a warp in my board, getting it damp with the material or the product that I put on it. It's giving it a little bit of a warp. But when I go to put this on the back side, it kind of works against each other in that it will keep it flat that way. So you do want to give that other side a coat. You could use a hairdryer too, or you could go do something else for a little while this dries. It doesn't take it very long, but I put a good thick coat on there. There's another product that's real good to use for something like this, and you don't have to put the sealer in with it. It's called Chalky Gesso, and it's also by Deco Art. If it was a piece of reclaimed wood, something that had a previous life as something else, you can use that Chalky Gesso, and it works as a chalk paint and a gesso, so it fills in some of those uneven grains, or if it's worn, it will help to fill that in, and that will work well for something like this too. And you don't have to worry about the multi-purpose sealer. It's just about dry. And when you use that multi-purpose sealer, if I'm painting something and it's a little more maybe heirloom quality, or something that I intend to have for many, many years, something like that, I can use a piece of sandpaper on it. This is just a sanding sponge, and give it a real quick light sand, and it will just smooth out that surface a little bit more. Okay, so you don't have to have that, but you'll feel a difference when you touch this piece. So now I'm just going to put a little bit of white paint on there, and just plain white paint. So no sealer this time, just the paint, but I'm still going to be working it in both directions, trying to get everything covered, trying to keep my edges nice and neat without a lot of you know, that peanut butter jar effect where you scrape off the paint on the edges as you're painting. You don't want that. And just go in every which direction. Again, getting that all nice and worked in. I promise it's going to get a little more fun here, but you know, this is all part of it. That prep work is so important so that you've got a piece of wood that's protected and sealed, and it's a nice smooth surface. It seems like, you know, it's pretty boring to just watch this paint dry, but it really is important. So we want to make sure that we take time for that. So we're going to get this all nice and sealed and dry and ready to go. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to work on putting these stripes on the background. And there is a little trick. You can do that a number of different ways, but especially on a circle, it can be really tricky to get those straight and get those even and so forth. So I'm going to show you how I do it. If you have a better way, by all means, use it. There are no rules as far as, you know, not using your own methods. So you have to make sure that you, you know, you don't have to do it my way just because I did it that way. So I'm gonna get this nice and dry. It takes just a minute. Once you'll see it starting to go from having some shine in certain places to being really nice and matte. And then after you're done, or you think that you're dry, you're going to want to let it sit and get, you know, kind of to room temperature. But if you're not sure, if you touch the back side of your hand, because it's a little more sensitive to it, if it feels cool to the touch, it's still a little bit damp and it's not quite dry. So you want to let it dry a little bit more. Say you want to, this is a 12-inch and the pattern is 12 inches that I have included, the line drawing is 12 inches. But say you want to do an 8-inch sign. You can easily, on your copy machine or your, you know, your multi-purpose printer, whatever, or you can take it into a big box store to have a copy made and reduce the size. That is perfectly acceptable. You can also make it bigger if you chose to make a bigger sign. Maybe you wanted it 18 inches. You could do that and just play with those proportions. It is feeling like it is dry. And what we want to do is set up our board so that we can get those stripes on there nice and even. And there are a couple ways to do it, but I'm going to show you the way that I seem to usually end up doing this. Oops, there's my scissors fell out. There's a ruler. This is called a see-through ruler, and a lot of quilters use this ruler. And I like it because it's got the grid on it. You can see through. It's numbered on both sides. It's exactly 2 inches wide. It just works really, really well for stuff like this. So this is just shy of 12 inches. So I'm going to center that ruler on here. But I'm also going to mark where that center line is. So I'm going to put a mark at 6 inches and a mark at 6 inches, and then I'm going to turn it and do the very same thing this way. I'm going to just 6 inch, 6 inch. So now I know that I've got the center line this way, the center line this way. So I need to find where that intersects in the middle. And I'm going to line up these two lines. And I'm just going to put a little line in the middle. And it's okay if it's not exactly right, because all I need to know is where it's going to intersect. So I know that it's about right here is the middle of my sign. And just so I don't have to try and, well, it's not going to want to, so I don't have to maybe work so hard to cover it, I am going to erase the pattern lines that I don't need, and or the pencil lines. And because it's fresh paint and it's white, it's not wanting to come off all that well, but that's okay. It will cover, because that's why I put my my colored line is in the center, right? So I'm going to do that. I've got my center line, and you can see that with this see-through ruler with that little dot, I want to put that right in the middle of this ruler, and then I've got my center line, and I know that I can put, I'm going to do just 2 lines. And there I've got my top and bottom. I didn't put them on very, very dark because I don't want them to be super deep and dark. I'm going to line up this 2-inch ruler on that lower line. And then I'm going to do another line. And I've got room for 1 more. And you could make these lines whatever width you wanted. I just do it this way because that's what my ruler is, and it makes it real simple. So I've got it going off the end. I always want the center of my board to have the main element, in this case the stripe, centered. It's going to help it look better than if I were to start from one edge and go to the other. Then I'll end up with uneven areas on the edges, and that seems to make it look a lot more off in terms of the centering. Now these probably won't be exactly right in terms of what I've got on both sides here. They're probably not precise, but they're pretty close, and so that's okay. Now there's a few different types of tape that you can use in order to tape this off and keep it nice and straight. One is the blue painter's tape. This is just the same tape that you might use when you're painting in your home. And you just take off a piece of this, and then I'm gonna, remember I said I was gonna keep this main painted line right in the center of my board, and I'm gonna tape off at that pencil line. And I want to be just on the outside of that so that I don't have any pencil line to erase if I can help it. And I'll get that nice and burnished down. You could use an old club card, you know, a plastic card of some sort to burnish that down, or you could use a bone folder, whatever you have. But you can use this blue painter's tape. There's also tape called frog tape that you can get. It's a green color, but it's also with the painter's tape usually at places like Home Depot and Lowe's and, you know, the hardware stores. You can use that really easily too. And I'm just about out of my blue painter's tape, so I'm going to use another, see if I can get this other part of it done. And then I'm going to show you how my favorite tape to use is the Scotch Magic Tape. Now, I've tried other brands and it doesn't have the same effect. Scotch Magic Tape is nice because it's see-through, it's transparent, so you can see where your lines go. I'm going to, like I said, keep using this just on this side. I'll do the other line that we have at the top with that Scotch Magic Tape. But this works out really well, but it's a little harder, I think, to line up because you've got that blue tape that is opaque. You can't see through it and line up your lines real well. Whereas with the Scotch Magic Tape, you can, and it works out real well still. So you want that all nice and really smooth down so we don't get paint running underneath it. Then I've got my Scotch Magic Tape. So you've got that green frog tape that you can use. You can also use Scotch Magic Tape. And you're going to line that up on the line. That one I got a little short, so I'm going to do the bottom one first. But you can see if you've gotten it over the line, or say I had already painted something on here, I would be able to place it based on what I had on there already. But the Scotch Magic Tape works real well too. So it's really up to you. Well, my goodness, it is just my thing where I'm getting it a little too short. So that's okay, because you can overlap it. It just sometimes works a lot easier if you don't have to overlap it. But rather than waste it, what I've already got on there, I'm just gonna, and I may have to make a little bit of a fix there with my brush. But once I've got that tape all down and nice and adhered, I think I'll tip over all my paint back here. But I've got colors, and again, those colors are listed in your instructions. And I'm going to now take that color that I used for my stripes. This is going to be the same color as the sample one that I did. This is called Crystal Blue. That aqua color is called Crystal Blue. And so I'm going to be using that. And when I do use this, I'm not going to put, a lot of times when I'm base coating things, I put a little bit of water in my brush because it takes water to make paint move. And so that makes sense to me to get, you know, that brush wet before I start base coating. But with something like this where we're wanting that paint to be a nice solid base coat color, we want to make sure that we don't add that water to it. This has a little gunky in it. And I'm going to go over the edge of that tape. Now on the Scotch tape, it's hard to tell where that edge is unless you're right here. I can see it, but I know, you know, it's harder for you to see. But I'm just going over the edge of that tape because I want that really knife edge, sharp, straight line for the edge of these stripes. So I've got that first one is laid on there. I'm going to go over this second one. Same thing. I can go over the edges because it's really adhered to the board, because I really made sure that that had a lot of pressure on it and made sure it was stuck. So I'm just going over, pulling it off the edges, and I can feel it start to stick in my brush. The paint is sticking to my brush and getting a little bit stickier. If I were painting like I normally do, when I feel that paint start to stick like this, I would add some water. But in this case, remember, we don't want to add water. So I'm going to get a little more paint, and then I'm going to just continue. And that creamy feel comes back right away when you get a little more paint on there. And notice too that I'm using, even though this is a brush that, like I said, is past its prime, I'm using the biggest brush that it can take here, because I don't want a little tiny brush that, number one, is going to take me a long time, but my paint in the meantime is going to dry in between. And so I want to get that paint on there, I want to get it dry, and then I want to get that second coat of color on there, because I know I want this to be really nice and solid coverage for this. Okay, and we're ready for our final coat. Need a Now, some people, before they get started with the color, if they're not sure if it's adhered down, if the tape has gotten a nice seal on the surface, sometimes the first coat people will put on is the background color that you do first. So in this case, it was Snow White. Sometimes people will do their first coat with that Snow White, and what that will do is seal down that tape. And if some does, like seep underneath the tape that we use for the stripes, that white will be what seeps and it won't show because the rest of the background is white. So I hope that makes sense, but that's what a lot of people do in order to avoid having to make a lot of cleanup after. So I'm going to get this dry. Now I am going to be using paint pens, a black one and a white one. Now if you don't have paint pens, don't stress it. Most people have black and white paint, and you can use a brush and that black or white paint and be just fine. The paint pen is just a little bit of a shortcut. It's easier. We're not used to using paintbrushes usually as much as we are pens. So that's something that you can use and, you know, get a little bit of a head start on it. But a brush works just as well. Plus you get acquainted with that brush a little bit more too. I love this color. It is so pretty. So pretty. I hope you're having fun with the spring fling. Okay, so that feels nice and warm. When I take this, and it looks like it's dry, I don't see any shiny spots. When I take this tape off, I'm going to pull it up, but I also want to pull off to the side, and that will help me to not pull up that tender first coat of Snow White that I have. But you can see the nice straight line that I'm left with. So again, I'm going to pull off to the side. And it's okay if it's got a little bit of a, you know, something that you need to clean up or take care of. That's okay too. Some of my pencil line is showing here. I'll show you that. And that's easy enough for me to clean up. Because even though the tape feels like it should just lay down and be a nice solid line, sometimes it will stretch a little bit, or it will, you know, get off the main line just a skosh. And so you might be left with a pencil line or an area to clean up a little bit. But for the most part, this is really nice because it gives you such a pretty sharp edge that you didn't have to work real hard at trying to keep straight with your brush. There we go. And if you look at this line right here, you can see some of that pencil line that's right there showing. And so I want to get rid of that, or try at least. So I'm going to get out my eraser. This is just a regular pink eraser. Pink erasers have a little bit of pumice in them, so it will lightly sand so that that pencil line comes off. And it doesn't take much. I could have taken my brush with some white paint on it and gone over it that way too. But now I'm all set. I've still got my stripes. Everything's going well. In order to get this striped effect on the stripes, I just used a medium tip paint pen. Now, this one is some brand I got on Amazon. Usually I use the Posca pens or the Artistro brand. So there's different Posca sizes and things, but a Posca pen, P-O-S-C-A, Those are available on Amazon or at any of your craft stores. The other one I like to use is Artistro. But Posca or Artistro are usually the ones I go to. But this one, like I said, is just a kind of a generic one. With paint pens, you want to push them on a scratch piece of paper a couple times to make sure that they're running. It takes this nib really to get saturated so that you can keep going with it. But I'm not caring if this line is exactly straight. I want some of them to be equal distance. Others I want to be touching. I just want it to look very random. And you'll go over all of these stripes. I'd have to stop and really make sure that I had my brush lined, you know, or loaded with a lot of paint. And with something like this, I get to just keep going. Once in a while, I have to stop and make sure that my brush or my pen has enough paint. Now, this thin board, you can hear it very easily, but usually when I'm using a paint pen, I don't want to hear anything, because usually when you're using a paint pen, if you hear it, you're pushing too hard and you run the risk of splattering that paint pen by going away from yourself and stuff. So, you know, a nice easy touch, but I'm really not pushing that hard. I'm going to plunge it a couple times because my line is getting a little bit weak. And you can see how much brighter that went after I plunged it. It will dry a little bit softer, but I'll just go over some of those areas. And then we'll let that dry. So that's all I've got there. It looks like where I was down here when my pen started getting a little bit dry, could use a few extras just to get it even. So that's all I need to do. If there is a place like this where you had that pencil line and it didn't quite erase, you can touch it up with that white paint pen, just real, you know, don't get too carried away, but it will help you to get rid of that line should you need to. I want this to be dry. And then I'm going to place my stencil. Now the stencil is one that I got on Amazon. I got a set of 20 of them for 12-inch circles. And so this one I used it on the original. I didn't wash it yet. And then you can see where it had some other, it says welcome to our home. It had a heart. It had some flourishes on the words. I didn't want any of that, so I just put some of that blue painter's tape over the top. I'm going to get this lined up. I want it to be about right with the edges. It's a little bit tricky on something like this, where this is using that bounce lettering, where the lettering, some of it goes below the line, and it's not all sitting nice and straight on top of the line. But if I'm looking at my nice straight lines I have that I use for my stripes, then I'm going to be able to use that to help me line up my my word nice and straight. You can use a stencil brush to get this placed real well. I want to make sure that I'm not too far over. It might be. I'm going to pull it just a skosh. Try to pull it a skosh. So just pull it over a little bit. That's better. Yeah, so you can use a cosmetic sponge or a stencil brush to get this nice and evenly coated in here. I'm going to use the color Sapphire to get this stencil on here. I'm also going to be using a stencil brush instead of a cosmetic sponge for this. It just seems to go a little bit faster. So I'm going to take this sapphire blue, put a little bit on my palette, and then I'm going to just put a little on my brush. Now that's got way too much on there. I don't want to take that to my stencil. First thing I want to do is go and work it into my brush. I call it doing the hula. I'm swirling it one way, then the other, until I've got a little like footprint of that color that I'm using. I want to go to a dry spot on my paper towel and work to get as much of that paint off as I can. I don't want it to be anything but this soft color coming off. When you first get your brush loaded, to be safe, what you can do is you can pounce it. There's two different ways. So you can pounce it, and once you see how much paint is on there, there's not much there, then I can start to swirl. And I'm just like a regular painted surface. I want to get a little bit of paint on there, let it dry, and then come back and give it another coat. I don't want to go at this with a whole bunch of paint on my brush because it's going to force that paint underneath the edge of the stencil. So I'm just going to keep going, and pretty soon you'll find yourself having to work a lot harder. And if that gets to be the case, you want to go back to your little area that you did the hula, do the hula a little bit again, dry that off, make sure there's no clumps, and then come back to your piece. But just be careful. It's easy to get paint where you don't want it if you don't have that taped off. So I'm glad I get that taped off first, and then I don't have to worry about it. So that had a little more paint on it, so I'm glad I tapped it like this before I started doing the circular brush strokes there. And then I should be able to come back here to the beginning and get another coat of that on there. And so a stencil is a real easy way to get something like this on there. You don't have to work on it too much. You don't have to, worry about keeping your lines all nice and uneven and all of that. It just helps a lot. And like these stencils, I want to say it was $12 for 20 of them. And so I have stencils for a long time if I want to do other circular signs. Or if maybe you do a holiday bazaar, or maybe you do a crafter's mall or something like that. This is a great way to do some inventory real quickly without a lot of worry or effort. So now I'm going to take up my stencil. And what I don't like, some people don't mind it, I don't care for it, and I did get blue paint on there right away in a place I didn't want. So I'm going to get just a regular brush, a little bit damp, see if I can take care of that, and I could. I just smudged some on there, but you can see it looks really nice, but I want everything to connect. I don't want there to be those those gaps. So I'm going to take a small brush and a little bit of this blue paint that I used, and where there's broken lines, I'm just quickly going to connect them so that it's going to look more like something that I just wrote with a paintbrush. And that's what I want. And because I went over this a couple of times, I might need to go over this a couple of times once it dries. but it doesn't take very long, and I think it just makes a much nicer end result if you've got those connected like they would if we were writing with a regular pencil or pen. So just a little bit. Like I said, not a lot of effort, but these stencils give you a lot of options on what you can write. You know, you don't have to have just welcome. You could have home sweet home. There's one in the set that I got that says, this is our happy place. You know, welcome to our home, or it's good to be home. So there's all different types. And then you can always get the sets of stencils that have something to do with, you know, children or pets or a holiday. So there's a lot of options. But just connecting those, and hopefully you can see how easy that is to connect, and that it really makes it have a much different feel when it's all connected versus all broken apart and looking like it's a stencil. It's just a nicer finished look. And I know that there's a lot of great choices out there for signs that you can do, but sometimes it's nice to have something that you've painted. It's just another layer of your work that you can be proud of. I got a little tiny bit outside here. That's not wanting to come up too much, but it's not showing either, so that's okay. Just have a couple more. And if you take your brush and start on an area that's already painted, like I'm getting my brush right up here, and then go around, it's gonna look a lot nicer and a lot smoother than if you go up to the area that has the gap and then try and just paint on that area. It's going to, inevitably, it's going to get crooked. And it's just easier if you kind of start out on the good paint, and then, but keep that dampened brush handy in case you go out. You have a place that you need to kind of clean up. Just a little extra effort there. I have one more that I want to get cleaned up. There we go. Now, once you have that first coat on, then it's time to put on like the highlight. And in order to do that, let me go in just a skosh. I'm going to use my Provence Sky. It's a lighter blue, and we're going to use that for the highlight. I'm going to use just a small liner brush. In this case, it's a 0 liner brush. It's a short liner. You could use a longer liner if you have one, or just a small brush. If you've just got a basic set, just use one of your smaller brushes. And I'm going to put a little bit of water with my paint because I want it to be a little bit what we call washy. So I'm going to take some paint and I'm going to have some water droplets here, and just kind of, I want it to feel like heavy cream. I don't want it to be super runny, but I want it to have, I want it to feel slick. And so that's what I'm using. And I'm going to start with my W, and I'm going to start up on the tip of that brush, and then I'm going to push a little bit as I get down toward the thicker area, pull up, and then lift up, and that will help me to have a little more dimension on my lettering. So I don't need it to match exactly the width. I just want it to have a little bit of another color in there showing up. And I'm thinking about how this is going to be if I were writing this with a pen or a pencil. I want the part that, like, I'd be putting my pen or pencil from here up and around, so this side would be on the top. So I want that line to be the full line. And then just lift up, and it becomes a lot easier. Now, say this is just something where you think, oh, this is just too much. I can't do this. This is not what I signed up for. Don't do this part then. You don't need to have anything other than what you're comfortable with. You know, you can do exactly as much or as little to this as you want. I could have left it just with the stencil on there and it would have been fine. This just takes it, you know, with that extra step, it takes it a little bit further. And just know that with a pencil or pen, you can push away from yourself. With a brush, you can't. You have to pull toward yourself. So it's a little bit different. So now you can leave it like this if you want. But again, if you want to take it a little bit further, you can see that I did some drop shadowing on those letters just to give them a little more power, a little more, I don't know, it'll make them a little more noticeable. I'm going to put a little more water with that because I want it to be less full strength paint and just fade off into the background because I want this to look like a shadow. So I'm going to go on the left side of the letter and the lower edge of the letter. Left side and then lower. And this is something that you just get with practice on that left side. Lower. One of the things in lettering that I learned quickly is I will misspell words more often when I'm doing lettering than I ever did just on my own. You're concentrating on so many things that it's easy to get sidetracked and almost like disoriented because you're trying to do all of it at the same time. But just a little drop shadow. Oops, that wasn't good. I tipped on my little turntable here. That's an easy fix though. And then just that drop shadow is going to help it just have a little bit more contrast and so forth. So the left and the lower, looks like I forgot here. And I think that we are pretty okay with that drop shadow. Okay, so there is that part of it. Now I need to get this dry so I can put on the rest of my pattern. And with the line drawing, like the one I gave you, you're going to have the opportunity to make a line drawing if you want. Now there's a couple of ways to do that. You can do that with some tracing paper, or this is vellum. You can also put it through a copy machine if your copy machine holds, will let you do that, or you can just trace it on your own. I'm going to get a piece of tracing paper here. Oops. And this is going to look like it is carbon paper. Oops, I'm knocking paint off, you guys. It's going to look like it's carbon paper, but it is not. Carbon paper has wax in it that will cause a real mess on your painted surface. This is a graphite paper. So the same material that's in a pencil is what is in or on this paper. So it's almost like using a pencil, but you're tracing. So what I want to do is line this up. Let's see. And it might be a little bit off. Sometimes it gets off in the when you're copying it or whatever. It tends to shrink it up a little bit, or who knows. So just a little bit of a, yeah, that's close enough type of thing here. So I go like that. I've got a little bit of tape on there that I want to help keep it straight where I've got it. I'll put another piece on the other side. And you always want to line up your pattern before you put that graphite paper underneath. So I'm going to just slide it up here and do this bird first. All I need is the main elements of that bird. I don't need the whole thing, you know, or all the little dots and stuff, because I'm going to be putting that main color in there. And so I'm just putting on the pattern. I'm tracing it with a stylus. These are, this is just like a card making tool, and it's got like a little round ball at the end of the little ends here. Hold on, let me see if I got it. Then I'll put on the wing. I'll put on the legs later, not with a pattern, just, you know, I'll freehand those on. But I'm just going to put the main lines on it. You could also use just a pencil or a pen. That would give you enough of a, come on, I can't get that back behind there, come on. Well, then fine, we'll go this way. I want to get that little bee up there. So with the bee, all I'm going to do is put the circle of the body, because I feel comfortable doing the rest of it. You can do as much or as little as far as your pattern goes. If you want to do all of it, if you want to base coat it and then put on all the little details, you could do that. I like to put on as little as possible because I don't like to try and get rid of those pattern lines when I'm done. So I've got just the little bodies on, and I'll show you that. I'm going to put the little circle on for that bee. And then for the flowers, I'm going to put on those centers first. And with a really light hand, I'm going to use one line to put on those petals. So my petals are going to go, I'm not going around the outside edge. I'm just giving myself a line to follow. And one line on the stem. I'll add the leaves, but not right now. So one line for each of those petals. And one line for the stem. If you feel like you need to put on the whole thing, by all means, you know, make yourself happy. I just know myself well enough to know that I don't like trying to cover up those lines or get rid of them. So I try to use as few as I possibly can. Okay, I think, did I have that one on? I don't remember. Yep, I did. So now when I take this off, the side's making a lot of noise. I've got my basic pattern lines on there. And then I'm able to put on, see there, I rubbed my pattern or my graphite paper along on here. And so now there's a little bit that I can get rid of that. if it rubs along it, sometimes it will leave some of that dark behind. I'm going to use Perfect Peri to put my bird on. It is a periwinkle color, a deep periwinkle, I think, and just a real pretty color. And when I go to put the base coat colors in, I like to use a filbert brush. Now, a filbert brush used to be called sometimes a cat's tongue. It's got a rounded tip, but it's also like a flat brush. So it's got kind of the best of both worlds. So when you go to add that color or block in the color on your piece, you have, pardon me, this nice rounded tip that you can use. And if this were me by myself, I would go right over that wing, because that wing is something I can add in a minute. I'm going to go around the wing though, since I am trying to set a great example. So then I can put that up on the side and use that side. So that's what I mean by this being like the best of both worlds. So it's got a lot of flexibility in this brush, in these filbert brushes. But a round brush would work well. You know, you could use any brush really that you feel comfortable with. People ask me all the time, you know, what's the best brush to get? Well, the best brush to get is like the best tennis shoes to wear, the best flip-flops to wear. It's the one that you're most comfortable with. It's not going to be necessarily the one I like. You might, you know, ask me my opinion or whatever, but it might not fit your feet. You know, it might not be the right thing for you. I know I hear people talk all the time about Skechers shoes. I can't wear them. They don't fit my foot right. And, you know, it doesn't mean that they're a bad brand or it's a bad brush or whatever. It's just whatever works well for you is what you should be using. So now this may look like it doesn't have very good coverage, and it doesn't. I'm going to want to go back and touch this up, but I want to have my paint go on there in a nice, smooth, even stroke. I don't want there to be big glops of paint. I want it to be nice and flat. If I run my finger over this board, I prefer that I don't feel any ridges from too much paint on my brush. So I'm just putting in, and now that I look at it, it would be cute to just leave this wing showing the way it does with that stripe on it. It would be cute that way. So you could do it that way too if you wanted. You could just leave it like that. But I love all the little details. That's one of my favorite parts to doing any of this stuff. Okay, so then I want to, let's see, I think I'm going to put on my yellow for my bees. And this is a fancy way. This is banana cream. I like using my middle finger, odd paintbrush, huh? And put on, let's see, put on my bees with just a print of my finger. And I can always fix that up. So there's my little yellow ones, and those will take a minute to dry because they're, you know, quite a bit of paint, but it goes really fast that way. I also noticed that when I put on the pattern for my little ladybug, the top of my ladybug on the W kind of got over a ways, and I don't want it over that far. It's covering up the wrong area of the W for me. So I'm just going to erase that, but I know where it's at. I'm going to use a color called Watermelon Slice. It's a corally red. It's real pretty. And I'm going to start with that little ladybug that is on, I'm going back to my filbert brush, and I'm going to start with that ladybug that was on the little bit of the W. This is going to need more than one coat, I'm quite sure. And then I'm going to go over to the C, has a little forward-facing ladybug. And then over here to the E, I'll let those dry. I'm going to go over the wing on my bird with that crystal blue. And you could have left this blank and not put those stripes in it, but it would have been hard to keep those stripes looking continuous if you would have stopped to not, you know, get any of those paint pen marks on that wing. It's just easier sometimes to just go over it later. So that's what I did there. Then I'm going to switch to a little bit bigger square brush. I'm going to grab a 6 flat. It's about 1/4 of an inch wide, and I'm going to put in the petals on my flowers. So the top, the 3 pink flowers have bubblegum pink petals. Bubblegum pink. And I'm just going to go on those straight lines that I had marked, and you can see my pencil line. But if you look at the original, or if you look at the picture, there are lines on each of the petals for either of the colors in another deeper, darker color. So I can easily cover those up with that line that I'm going to be doing with that other color. In this case, it's going to be dragon fruit, and in the other, on the other one, it's going to be watermelon slice. So I'll come back and give these a second coat, but if that shows up, just know that I am going to be going over that with my stripes of that complementary or that contrasting color. So I'm just putting those on. Again, this is the number 6 flat. Remember, we just traced on one line. I hope you try this. I hope you try and do your own signs if you've never done it before, or even if you have done it. And again, this could be any color, you know, that you have that you want it to go with. You do not have to use what I've used. You know, if you're doing something with a certain floral or a certain ribbon and you want your sign to match, boy, when you do your own, you have that freedom, and so use it. We'll let those dry. So we've got those pink ones on there. Now we're going to use bright salmon, which is a real pretty deep coral color. And I'm going to get those on there. Same brush, 6 flat. Just cleaning up those ends. And these are just fun little fantasy flowers. They're nothing that are real fussy. They're sure whimsical. They're not realistic at all. But very conducive to springtime and, you know, fun. I think spring has a lot of whimsy in it because we're so excited to see spring come after sometimes a very, very long, cold winter, depending on where you're at. Okay, so there's our bright salmon. I'm going to go back to my watermelon, little ladybug areas, and give those a second coat. I'm going to go up to my bird and put a little more of that Perfect Perry on the bird just to give that a second coat. And anywhere that you feel like you need a second coat, you know, give this just a little bit more love. I'm going to give my petals a little more pink and some coral on those bleach or those bright salmon ones. Again, these are all Deco Art colors. Most of them are available at Hobby Lobby if you have a Hobby Lobby close by. Joann's and Michael's don't sell as many, if any, anymore, depending on where you're at. These are my favorite paints. They're very consistent. The texture is nice. The coverage is good. They are still manufactured in the US, if that's important to you. It is to me. And so I actually really enjoy the paint. But, you know, use what you have. Don't go out and buy a whole bunch of things when it's going to come out pretty with your colors too. So that makes a big difference with that second coat. And then my bright salmon. And on these kind of little flowers, I don't take time to really load my brush. If there's a little bit of extra on the brush, that's okay with me on these. I'm going to get my liner brush again. I'm going to get a little bit longer one for these. When I'm using a longer liner, I can get more paint and more water on my brush, so I don't have to reload as much. I'm going to get out some sour apple. It's a real pretty lime green color, and that's the color I'm going to use for my stems and my leaves. And I'm using a number 1 scroller or let's see, or a striper, sometimes they're called, or a script liner. And I'm first going to put on those stems with just one single line. So this is sour apple. Another color that would be pretty is one called Irish moss, if you like the lime color. I do for spring just because the flowers and the greens on the trees and things are all brand new, and so they're bright and not as mature. So the bright limes and stuff look like the fresh leaves and foliage that we see in the springtime. And then I've got my last one here. Now on these little leaves, if you've never done this, I'm going to do a little stroke on there with my leaves, but you can also put them on with a little round brush. You don't have to do a fancy stroke if you're not familiar with it. So don't feel pressured into doing the leaves the way I'm doing them. You could use a small brush and just put them on, you know, by painting them on. I'm going to use a number 4 filbert, that rounded brush that's got also a flat side, and I'm going to place that down, and as I lift up, I'm going to turn to the side, and that way I've got a little leaf shape on there. So press it down, twist, and pull up. But again, you could just fill these in with a small brush and do it that way too. So don't feel like you have to do it any specific way. It's not necessary. And we're going to go over these with pen to make them stand out. So there's my little lines, my little leaves. And just because I'm being a little bit fussy, I want to clean up that wing just a little bit. Just just up at the top here. And then I'm going to go over my little watermelon slice ladybugs. Reds are always the hardest to get good coverage on. Red is usually a pretty transparent color, and so to get, especially on a darker color like, you know, our blues or something, it's hard to get a nice good coat of coverage. So oftentimes those reds will be a little bit stubborn to get covered, so you'll have to go over them 2 or 3 times. If you need to clean up any areas on your bumblebees, now's the time. I'm going to use that same brush because I still have to put on my little beak. So I'm going to clean up my little bumblebee bodies if I need to. Most of them, they're pretty okay. And then I need to have that little triangle shape for the nose, or the beak. The nose, not a nose on a bird. Okay, so then we're ready for some of that detail stuff. And I'm going to start down here with my my little petals, because I do want to get those dry so I can put the centers in my flowers. So I'm going to start with these lower edge ones, and those have that watermelon slice in them on the bright salmon petals. And remember, I'm going to use this to cover up that pencil line if I need to. So you need to think about that as you're putting these 3 little stripes on there. If you've got a pencil line that you need to cover, now is your big opportunity. So just those little stripes. And I want them uneven. I don't want them perfect. It's okay if they're a little bit crookedy. I'm good with all of that stuff. Again, they're just whimsical. And then the other pink ones get stripes of dragon fruit. It's a pretty hot pink color. Notice I'm pulling these stripes toward me. It's always going to go better if you pull the stripe toward you versus try and push that brush away. Oops, got some pink on my background there. Finish up that one. And then I'm going to try and get that pink off of there, or it might have been watermelon slice. Either way, I don't want it there. There we go. There we go. Okay, now as we are kind of closing in on things here, I'm going to get my liner brush and do the same thing that I did on these little flowers with Provence Sky on the little tail of the bird. So that's that light blue. And I'm going to do the same thing on those little tail feathers. Oh my goodness, I've got red somewhere. There we go. Okay. Through the center, each of the sides, just like those petals. And I think these two colors together are so pretty. So, so pretty. And then with the end of my brush, or you could use a stylus depending on, you know, the size that you have. I'm going to get a little small handle on my brush and just get some of that Provence Sky. And I'm going to put on some polka dots with Provence Sky. There we go. Silly little bird. I just love those. Okay, and then for the centers of all of my little flowers, I am going to use my middle finger again. Now, some people don't like to do this. If you don't like to do it this way, then use a brush, and that is just fine. And we'll let those dry. I'm going to give my little bird beak a second coat. Got a little area to touch up on one of my bees. And then on any of those flower centers that I need to kind of cover up a little bit of the pattern line, I'm just going to go in there and do that real quick. And like nothing, they're done. Well, not done, but they're touched up. And I believe the rest is all pen work. So I'm going to use a fine tip white to do the wing on the bird. You always want to shake up those paint pens if you've never used them. I'm going to just do a double line across the wing, a double line down the center, and off on each side. Then I've got little polka dots. Ta-da on him for the white. Then I'm going to go with the black. Okay, I just got some brand new black pens, and do you think I can see them? And I know I just put them here. Oh, for Pete's sakes. I'm a mess, you guys. Just a mess. Oh, there they are. They're right in front of my nose. Right in front of my nose. Now, these are the Posca ones. I can't get it open. Now, Posca pens have a medium and an extra fine. They have some bigger ones too. But on their extra fines, they have one called a pin type, or a pin type tip or something like that. Okay, so what you want to do, first of all, let me take that off. You can see that little nib is white. You want to plunge it, brand new pen, a few times. Shake it. Plunge a few times. Shake it. You'll know when the ink is coming down or the paint's coming down because you'll see that nib start to turn black. Do you see how that's starting to turn black? And here it's starting to write. But I want to wait until that nib is all the way black. Here it's going. So there you can see, pretty cool. I'm going to work on my little ladybugs first. And I'm just going to put a little oval for a head, a couple little antenna. You can do little spots instead of hearts if you like, but I like the little hearts on the side. And then a broken line. The reason I use a broken line is it's easier to make it look straight with a broken line than it is to have just a hope for the best and do a broken line, you know, freehand. Or do a solid line, sorry, not a broken line, but a solid line. So I'm doing the same oval on the bee's head. I'm going to give a couple little antenna. I like to go up on one side, up on the other, and then make kind of a little point. Almost like I guess it could be a stinger. I kind of think of it as just that fuzziness that's coming to a point. And then I like that little fuzzy to kind of come off the edge. Then I'll line the edge, put a little whooped and a whooped. Easy peas. This little one on the C is going to have the broken line, but it's facing forward. So I'm just going to put a little oval like this. I'll do my little, and then just half of a heart, because that's just barely going to show. And over here, this one's going up, up, and away on the E. Real easy that way too. I can go over here to the bird and get his little tail outlined, a little broken line. And I do want my center feather here to be the one that is all the way outlined. Now on these acrylic markers, if you want to spray varnish, you can use a real light mist of varnish 3 or 4 times versus a heavy one. You can also use a brush-on varnish if you prefer. A water-based poly will work really well, and then you're not breathing in that overspray either. I'm going to just put a couple little peg legs on there, like so. It comes together pretty fast once it starts coming together, doesn't it? We're going to put this little bee together. So the little head, the little antenna, the little pointy backside, these paint pens really do make quick order of things, you know. And I just love a little bumble. They're so cute. Now, when we're finished here, keep in mind that there is going to be something special for you to take a look at. I do have a workshop. It's my 2nd annual My Spring Fling. And so you're invited to that, and you'll have a link if you'd like to see 2 more projects that are totally appropriate. They're both on 12-inch rounds as well. You could put them on other shapes or whatever, but there's 2 more signs, both very, very easy to do no matter what skill level you're at as a painter. And so you're invited to that. I've got all the details after this will come up, and you can see them, and would love to have you if you want to be there and take another class. So, but I give it as a thank you to my people every year, and it's a 5-day workshop, 90-minute classes every day, and we do the 2 projects start to finish all together, like we did this one here today, and it's $15. So for less than the cost of a coffee every day, you could be painting and doing your own signs. So it's a good deal. It's a limited palette. You know, it's like this where I don't have a whole ton of colors, and I reuse those colors, and it's just a lot of fun. There's a lot of great people that are very supportive. You get to be in a private class group on Facebook and have all of the patterns and the Zoom info, and everything is all in one place waiting for you, and it's a lot of fun. And it will be March 11th through the 15th, and I would love to have you. I always want more painters. It has brought me such pleasure and fun and wonderful friends in my life that I'm always anxious to share it with other people and hope that they find as much fun in it as I have. So that is my invitation to you. But before that, you have all of the things that you've been doing for the Deco Exchange Spring Fling, and that's amazing. And so all kinds of fun things to do and to craft and create. And now on these stems, I did not do a ton of detail because they get too busy really fast. So you don't want to put, you know, too much. I even considered not outlining both sides of those stems just because of that very reason, you know. So now my centers on my flowers still need my honey brown dots. But after that, we are finished. This is a great project, though. Like I said earlier, change out the colors and make this, you know, your own thing where it matches your piece, some favorite ribbon, you know, just anything. It can be personalized. It can have something other than welcome on it. You know, make yourself happy. These paint pens make things a lot easier, though. Things just go a lot faster. So there we are, and then our little dots of honey brown. And if you prefer, if you know, this is kind of a warm light brown color, but if you'd prefer to have something, you know, like white would look cute too. So don't feel like you have to use what I used. But I'm just dotting, and then I'll dot with the pen. Now, I'm not going to finish doing all of mine because they're still a little bit wet, but you can see exactly what I did here. And then I went over and just tapped on a few little dots at the base of those centers with my paint pen. But I don't want to get everything all mushed together. But that's all you need. That's all you need. So everything comes together and looks just so springy and cheery, and will go on a beautiful wreath on your front door. It would look great with a little bit of ribbon. You know, I hope you have fun with it, and I hope you take a look at the other offer that I have, the workshop, and be sure and get all of the instructions and make your own copy so that you can do this again. I am so happy that you spent some time with me. I would love to have you follow me on my page on Facebook. It's Lizbeth Stull, Cottage Caboodle, and or Cottage Caboodle Lizbeth Stull. It's one of the two. There's not many Cottage Caboodles out there. So have a wonderful time in the Spring Fling workshop. I will see you soon. This is Lizbeth Stull, Cottage Caboodle. Bye.